Good morning, and thank you for joining AI-Powered Language, a new era of enhanced customer engagement with Alex Olson, Senior Director of Vertical Strategy at Persado. As a reminder, if you have any questions during the conversation, to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much, Mara. The pandemic-driven surge in e-commerce and the emergence of stricter privacy regulations around the use of third-party data has truly created a conundrum for digital marketers. What we're seeing is that forward-thinking businesses are adopting new and innovative approaches that combine human and machine in their messaging to creatively communicate and also personalize messages. Really, the new era of digital marketing is upon us, and AI, ML, and first-party data are truly at its core. I'm really honored to be here today with Alex Olson. He is the Senior Director of Vertical Strategy for Persado, and he's responsible for injecting deep industry understanding and insights into Persado's client and partner relations. Alex and his team use a combination of campaign performance and public economic data to really predict the incremental revenue Persado can deliver for clients as a result of AI-driven marketing campaigns. So today we're going to discuss why digital marketers should rethink the traditional use of third-party data and prioritize advanced technologies that we're going to discuss today, like AI, ML, and NLP, that can really create a more customer and consumer-centric experience. So with that, let's get started. So as we look at the first slide here around kind of how AI is offering massive opportunities for marketers, Alex, how do you think about what can marketing leaders do right now to prepare for this, kind of huge amount of incremental revenue, if you will?
Sure. Well, first, let me say I appreciate you having me and looking forward to the conversation. In terms of what marketers can do to prepare to capture this market opportunity, number one, I would say be very forward-thinking in terms of testing strategy. So we'll get into this in a little bit more detail as the conversation goes on, but one of the main economic benefits that Persado delivers to our customers is about a 50-to-1 time savings in terms of testing in terms of doing multivariate testing versus A/B testing for creatives. So we'll actually take a look at 16 variants of creatives that can get delivered to the same audience. And that saves marketers about 50 times the amount of time to deploy creatives versus A/B testing. So be very forward thinking in terms of testing the actual creative and language that's being put in front of your customer base.
And do you find that as they're kind of starting to rethink this, what challenges are they being faced along the way?
Well, as we'll get into in a couple of minutes, I believe data and privacy are among the primary challenges, as well as attention span. There's a tremendous amount of white noise that consumers see across all channels, and sometimes marketing can be a little bit taboo when trying to capture a consumer's attention. So being able to choose the appropriate language, as well as other elements of marketing creative, like a call to action or even formatting, all of which we'll show examples of in a little while, I believe can really capitalize on the narrowing attention span of the modern consumer.
I think that's an excellent point, especially as we've all been inundated with messages, and we continue to hear how email, which many folks still rely on, continues to be less and less effective, unfortunately. As we look at the next slide, when we think about kind of this kind of first data, first party data and third party data, and kind of talking about this cookieless world, just to kind of set the stage, right? So first party data is the information collected directly from audience, and whether that's kind of submissions, cookies, customer service center, purchase history, other engagement, online or offline. And so that's, kind of truly around kind of, retailer direct. And then as we look at kind of third party, this is where information is collected by companies that don't have a direct relationship with consumers. And this is where we're starting to see a lot of changes because, Alex, many of the companies that we work with, the marketers have had historically, right, a high reliance on third party data, but that's really starting to change. And, as we've seen, right, social media players like Facebook and Twitter have removed third-party data from their advertising platforms. And, the biggest news, I think, last year in this space was around, kind of Google announcing right by the end of 2023 that they would remove support for third-party cookies. So as you look at this and think about this, what can marketers do to compensate for the loss of this, kind of very rich third-party data?
Sure. So one of the things that we're observing is a strong shift into first-party data, as well as data strategies surrounding the types of emotions and sentiments that consumers respond to most positively. That's one of the things that excites me most about the work that my team does and that Persado does. So Persado will make seemingly nominal tweaks to the language that consumers see based on the type of channel, place in the customer journey, as well as the audience demographics. And even something as straightforward as changing the orientation or changing the vernacular that's used in an email subject line can sometimes boost response rates by nearly double. And the reason this is important is because the ability to understand the sentiment of consumers and what it is that they respond to positively from an emotional perspective is, I wouldn't even say a great proxy. It's a great next frontier of being able to understand consumers in the modern age.
We oftentimes, right, as we kind of debate more time than you could possibly know around like titles of reports, right? Because truly, while the content inside is, hopefully incredibly valuable with data and insights, right? You really have to have the right title to get people to even click on it or think about opening it. So I actually think about this day and night more than you could possibly understand. So as we think about this options for understanding customers beyond third-party data, what have you seen kind of right? We're hearing a lot about kind of, fail fast, what they're kind of testing right now. What are you seeing that they're doing, and how is their journey, continuing to ebb and flow as things are changing very rapidly for them?
Sure. So one of the things that my team works on often with our customers and with our partners is understanding all of the different types of creatives that can be delivered to a specific demographic, which will skew positively and which will skew negatively in terms of eliciting a response. And it's actually shown a lot of very interesting data. I'll give a couple of examples. My team looks at the keywords that retail executives mention in their public filings on a pretty frequent basis. And we've actually found that retail executives who mention curbside pickup, buy online, pickup in store more frequently in a public forum, their retail brands are outperforming their peers in the stock market by, in some instances, 20% plus. So we'll take that insight and we'll test a hypothesis when we're running a campaign, whether it's a conversion campaign, whether it's upsell, cross-sell, brand awareness, and we'll test those macroeconomic insights against our more bespoke approach with our marketing partners to see if truly highlighting language around order fulfillment does move the needle in terms of customer loyalty, lifetime value, and conversion rate. And we've actually found that that's true, specifically given recent news about potential disruptions to the supply chain. The holidays just passed. And I think it gives us a very sharp point of view about the specific emotions to use when communicating with customers across specific channels, as well as specific places in the customer journey.
To me, what's really interesting about this is, we've obviously all had, let's just say a series of ups and downs over the past years, many of them unexpected. And this ability, right, to adapt language, right, to be, more sensitive or empathetic, it just seems to me that this is even more important right now than in the past, and probably will be in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Yep. And so as we look here and kind of, talk a little bit more about how retailers are shifting to first party and, kind of the impact of advanced technologies, we're continuing to see, just how important, and I would say actually, Alex, just, probably in 75% of our conversations, on anything that we're doing from a strategy perspective, this idea around first party data is, coming up more and more. And so I do think that it's even changing how people are selling their product. So I do feel that this is, kind of taking on a bit of a life of its own. As you look at, this, kind of unbelievable, right? 78.2% of respondents citing that the efficient use of first party data is very or extremely important for technology-driven digital marketing. Is that kind of along the lines of what you would have expected? And if not, why not?
It's absolutely in line with what I was expecting. And if you remember back a couple minutes ago, the point I was making about, marketers should be very forward-thinking around their testing strategy. This to me screams that multivariate testing over A/B testing for creative, that there's never really been more of a premium on that strategy up until now. One of the primary hurdles, if you will, that we overcome with our customers and our partners is how do we deploy the optimum creative as quickly as possible to capture that waning attention span, but also depending on the industry or the type of product that's being sold, many times the window of decision making for consumers is very finite, and brands need to be able to push out creative that will move the needle and attract the right kind of attention before an upcoming holiday. Like I know we have Valentine's Day in about 6 days. So to be able to test creatives and get the appropriate messaging out the door in 50 times less time, in my opinion, is one of our favorite value adds.
No, that's really quite interesting. And obviously from a holiday perspective, weather, right? I mean, there's so many things that ultimately do drive, kind of consumer behavior and conversion. As we think about, new channels of distribution, right, for retailers. So whether that's the metaverse, live streaming, kind of instant needs commerce, how do you think about, kind of not only first party data, but also kind of messaging and kind of the changes that you would see in terms of not only the message by channel, but also, kind of from a timeliness perspective as well?
Sure. I view, if I would say that the overall theme that I've observed in market with our clients who are really getting it, I would say that the tone has been very inclusive. It's been very conversational, and obviously it's been very appropriate and on demographic, if you will. The marketers that we work with who are really pushing the boundaries of increasing the effectiveness of their budgets, seeing 2-3x increase in customer retention for the campaigns that we work on. They are not only deploying artificial intelligence around creative, but they're also routing messages at the appropriate time in along the appropriate channel. So for example, we have a handful of marketers who will experiment with Instagram DM versus WhatsApp versus SMS. The language varies slightly, all of which are analytics that we're able to provide. And what those marketers are able to do is attract attention from their consumers, among a lot of white noise that the consumers may be seeing, to drive specific kind of behaviors like a repeat purchase or like enrolling in a loyalty program. So I'd say bottom line, very conversational, very on demographic, and matching the correct emotion with the correct channel has really made a big difference for a lot of our clients.
That's really helpful. I mean, as we look at the next slide, I think that, not only are organizations using, kind of AI for operational purposes, including predictive analytics and customer segmentation, but also to generate, creative content, improve personalization initiatives, and facilitate, more effective use of first-party data. I mean, we talked about this, kind of as we were preparing for the call. I think this is a particular area of passion for you, Alex. Can you talk a little bit about, especially with your background, but before Persado, and kind of how you think about integrating AI into the I guess the entire journey?
Sure. So I do have a fair amount of experience with contact center as well as order fulfillment and supply chain, and then I pivoted more into digital marketing when I joined Persado. Throughout my career, what I've noticed is when brands deliver consistent messaging across not only the customer acquisition but customer service lifecycle, that can really make a big difference in terms of retaining customers. And as we all know, it is cheaper to retain an existing customer than it is to acquire a new one. There are a lot of very interesting use cases currently happening with IVR, with chatbots, with contact center, as well as order updates. And these, 1/100th of a penny SMSs that get sent all without human intervention. If you apply that last mile of the appropriate emotion and appropriate creative, it can really make a big difference in terms of customer sentiment and customer retention. Then when you combine that with a seamless experience when someone calls in for customer support and the IVR is tuned to speak in vernacular, or the order of options is tuned based on the likelihood of the reason that the person is calling, all of those are ways that we have noticed leading retailers and leading marketers have capitalized on, these micro moments, if you will, of interacting with their customers that really make the difference between someone being loyal to a brand or someone potentially changing brands.
That's really helpful. And, are there, just even some examples, not necessarily using company names per se, but just as we start to kind of contextualize this a bit more in terms of kind of, if you will, kind of utilizing, first party data for marketing, and also utilizing kind of, having an AI approach, and just helping us kind of compare and contrast.
Sorry, Deborah, if you wouldn't mind repeating the question and cut out for a second.
Yeah. So if you can help us just kind of think about how kind of, if we look back and we're using more third-party data and less AI, less of an AI solution, and now with, kind of greater access or greater focus on first party, and also with this kind of AI overlay, how have things kind of, where were they, and where are they going, and what are some of the kind of metrics we should think about that?
Sure. So the analogy that I would use is one similar to a dartboard. So I think the volume and likelihood of hitting the bullseye, if we wind the clock back a couple of years, was probably throwing more darts and hitting the target less often. We've actually plotted customer acquisition cost with CPA over the last 5 years, and it looks like a wave graph. As
wow.
New technologies like CDP get introduced, we see a drop in CPA as companies are able to understand and activate their data, or take a look at structured versus unstructured data more effectively. When new legislation like CCPA or GDPR gets introduced, and data strategies need to pivot, we've seen there's a bit of a correlation with the rise in CPA temporarily, as customers need to slightly alter the way that they're looking at their data, or make considerations about how it is that they're contacting their customers. My hypothesis going forward is once marketers capture the opportunity to understand the types of emotions that their consumers or their shoppers respond to most effectively, we will see a drop in CPA, or we will see an increase in lifetime value. My team does a fair amount of work across industries, not just in retail, but we do a lot of work on financial services. And one of the things that my team is very excited to work on in the next couple of years is how do we take public record third-party data around FICO scores and median household income, borrowing and savings rates, and overlay that to shopping behavior. So that's a perfect example of where we would use third-party data that's publicly available and combine that with first-party data that a lot of our retail customers have access to. We've actually seen that pay dividends so far in financial services with being able to predict the types of emotions that people respond to based on their demographics as it pertains to saving versus investing. So I think that it's a next logical conclusion to draw to connect those emotions to what people choose to spend their money on in retail.
It's really interesting. I mean, one of the things that, as we're talking, I thought, and you mentioned chatbots before, but right, as, the ability to understand, right, the emotion, as you just mentioned it, of the consumer, right? And, maybe to kind of address them in a different way than somebody who's just like, okay, this is not what I expected. I understand. But, where you have that more emotional customer who could ultimately be, right, an evangelist, right, of taking care of properly, it seems to me that, we can't even necessarily measure the, kind of the benefits of this move to this kind of, AI-based approach.
Absolutely. And I do think that measuring what is actually contributing to an increased response rate is very important. And I know we're getting there in a couple of minutes, but one of the most exciting things about our solution is we can actually attribute 6 different elements of each piece of creative and how much language versus placement versus formatting attracted an increase in response rate. And the reason we're able to do that is because our solution tests 16 variants of creative at once versus 16 instances of A/B testing.
That's really impressive. I mean, I think that as we look at this slide, I think this speaks to so many of us, right? This idea around, just anything with the kind of creative and for, kind of the consumer and to get them to convert. And, as digital marketers utilize AI to distribute, manage, and analyze content, for creative content generation, this process around, I think even like images and words, right, that appeal to customers. I mean, right, we're also individual and unique. I do think that, from an NLP perspective or NLG, I mean, this time reduction in terms of being able to react seems to be fairly significant. And also, this idea around kind of what's being conveyed to the consumer, that, everything is really kind of truly generated for them. And I mean, I think they'll feel that. And so to me, as we look at this, how are you seeing CMOs take really this horsepower and, kind of putting AI and creative content generation together for an overall better experience?
Sure. So I think if we zoom out for a second, AI is already used and has been used very effectively across the customer journey. We've used marketers have used artificial intelligence for pricing strategy, even for optimizing the floor layouts of brick and mortar retail stores. So why not apply artificial intelligence to, in my opinion, what the common denominator is for all marketing? All marketing needs to have some sort of visual or audio-visual component. Consumers always see some piece of creative whenever a brand is attempting to contact them. So why not apply the same set of science and testing methodologies to the common denominator of what consumers are seeing? And if it's budgets that already need to be spent, one thing that my team takes a look at is what's the impact of an incremental dollar earned versus potentially an incremental dollar of marketing that didn't need to be spent. And that's something that we take a look at with our existing customers. And it seems a little counterintuitive for a marketing SaaS vendor to say potentially spend less marketing budgets. That's not necessarily the case, but it's allocating budgets in the appropriate channel at the appropriate audience, and applying artificial intelligence to make those decisions in a more scientific way.
I think as we look at the next slide, I mean, there is this idea, right, kind of efficiency and spend, but also efficiency and kind of, customer conversion and reaction. So I think that, there is, kind of quite a bit of opportunity here. And so I think that, I love the title of this, right? Welcome to a new era of customer-centric marketing. I feel like we've been talking about this for many years, but it's truly finally here. And, this idea of, right, as a consumer, you are getting kind of a personalized and authentic message. And, this idea that we'll see this be much more impactful for companies that we really care about. You know, this idea that you see this for larger corporations, how do you think about it for smaller companies as well? What's the opportunity?
Sure. I actually think the opportunity in the long run is more important for smaller companies. If I put my venture capital hat on for a second and think a lot about, startup direct-to-consumer brands, or even, startups that exist in the knowledge economy, many of whom have commanded a very high valuation with not necessarily being profitable for a long time. The ability for those brands to capitalize on their positive brand affinity, attract and convert consumers in a very cost-effective manner, can get them to profitability more quickly than they otherwise would have been. And I think that in a stage of a company's growth where testing is very important and there's a premium on opportunity cost, understanding from a scientific point of view what specifically consumers are responding to as it pertains to creative and marketing can really make the difference between whether or not a startup goes public or gets acquired or is in the category of also rans.
No, that's really helpful. And then can you maybe just talk us through this chart in terms of the contribution of language elements?
Sure. So one of the things that Persado provides our customers is a detailed breakdown of the 5 to 6 elements of every piece of creative that can contribute to a response. Those elements are the formatting of the creative, the emotion that is evoked, the description of the message that is being conveyed, even where each individual piece of the message is positioned, and then finally, what's the function or the call to action. So if we take a look at the left-hand side of the slide, we're looking at an actual proof that Persado sent on behalf of one of our clients. And then each bracket, the blue, green, and red brackets, correspond to a message element. So for example, one of the variants that we tested was offering a quantitative offer, the 20% discount versus not, conveying the emotion of achievement to this particular set of consumers, and the emotions can be tweaked based on the intended recipients. And then finally, putting the call to action immediately below the message. So for every single campaign that is run using Persado's influence, we are able to take a subtotal of each one of those message elements and understand A, what was being tested, and B, how much did what was being tested contribute to eliciting a positive response versus a control. And we see that breakdown of those subtotals on the right-hand side. So for this particular proof, just evoking the emotion of achievement for the intended recipient had a 76% influence on whether or not this message drove incremental clicks and conversions versus a control. The quantitative offer amount drove 21% of incremental traffic, and then the call to action drove 3%. This is not to say that that's a standard distribution. We've actually seen that pie chart look very different across different audiences, which is why doing multivariate testing has been so beneficial to our clients the past couple of years.
That's great. And I do want to address a question from the audience. And if anybody else has any questions, please just use the Q&A function at the bottom. So question was, what do you think the biggest barriers are for a brand in collecting their shoppers' first-party data?
So I would say the biggest barriers for a brand collecting first-party data are first and foremost completeness and the ability to extract data in both a structured and unstructured way from a data lake, from a CDP, etc. Once the challenge of actually extracting data is addressed, what my team actually would say, and what we've observed with our customers, is making heads or tails of what the data tells us. are there false positives? If there is a strong correlation with achievement being an emotion that is eliciting a positive response, do we believe that is correlated, or is it causal? One of the things that we've seen a lot of our marketers supplement their first-party data with is what I was mentioning earlier, public macroeconomic or consumer survey data to get an objective, publicly available yardstick to measure our hypotheses against. And we've seen on my team that that's a very effective approach towards capitalizing on first-party data.
That's really helpful. Thank you. As we move to the next slide, like I said, this is really, I think, kind of been the holy grail, this idea of a kind of superior personalized experience. And, if you think about the fact that, more than 90% either use or plan to use AI or ML to offer personalized experiences. I mean, I always think about this from like a loyalty perspective, which has been, one of the, I would say, biggest topics, kind of over the past 2 years is, retailers and brands have, spent less time in personalize with their customers and trying to think about, kind of loyalty, if you will, kind of beyond the physical store. How can digital marketers utilize AI to create brand loyalty? This is, something I'm personally fascinated with.
Sure. I think, delivering awareness campaigns that evoke the types of emotion the brand wants to convey is a great first step. But also, I mentioned earlier that the most successful brands that we've worked with capture sentiment and capture feedback on their brand identity from both their prospects as well as their existing customers. So we've seen insights taken out of contact center and net promoter score surveys that feed back into brand awareness and upper funnel campaigns. So closing the loop in terms of what your existing customers are saying to your support team, as well as what your prospective customers are responding to, I believe, A, has saved brands a lot of money and time, and B, has been a very effective use of artificial intelligence for both new and existing customers.
Great. We have another question from the audience. How do you take into account, it's a good question, a brand's identity when creating a marketing campaign?
So here, I think there's a good combination of art and science. So let me be very clear. Personato is a tech solution. It is SaaS. It is a product that our marketers can consume on their own. One of the things that I believe gives us a competitive advantage, and one of the primary benefits, I believe, of working with us, is we also do employ what we refer to as a brand content strategy team, which injects the very crucial human element into the marketing process. Because at the end of the day, though we can apply science to trying to automate or scale the delivery of messages around the brand's identity, the teams who are working and live their brand on a daily basis, or the agencies who have been hired to help brands live their identity, they're going to be able to supplement our science with a lot more qualitative insight around what consumers appreciate about the brand, et cetera. So, to maybe answer it more directly, I would say supplementing the statistical analysis of elements of a creative that consumers are likely to respond to, and seeing whether or not that supports or challenges your own perception about your brand's identity, in my opinion, would be a very effective strategy.
Right. And I mean, this to me is always, right, like the coup de grace, right, where we can actually see the rubber meet the road and, kind of get a real sense in terms of, the impact. Can you walk us through some of the examples on the slide?
Sure. So, one of the questions that I could definitely foresee coming up in the audience is, well, what does this actually look like in practice? What does this look like in scale? So what we're looking at here is an example of a Fortune 500 retailer that, by using Personato, generated $50 million of incremental revenue by applying our artificial intelligence across multiple channels. This particular customer's journey began by testing email, And I believe this case study shows a simple but very effective example about how Persado can be applied in market. In this particular case, the retailer wanted to reduce cart abandonment via an email that was sent via a trigger through a win-back campaign. As you can see here, when we show the baseline versus Persado optimized creative, there are very subtle changes that are made to actual marketing proofs. And I believe that that's kind of the secret sauce of our platform. So if we think back to the message elements from a couple of slides ago, we look at copy that is a control, which is written by humans who have a great sense for brand identity. And then we run that control through our multivariate testing across different channels to produce scientifically optimized edits to that copy that we believe will drive incremental revenue. A couple of call outs here that I believe made this implementation effective and are repeat themes when I work with our prospects and customers. The channel that the retailer chooses to test first, though it is predominantly email, it does vary, and I believe is tied to brand identity as well as the discrete financial challenge that the marketers come to us to try and solve. So in this particular case, cart abandonment was the KPI that the marketer wanted to address. That can actually be a very expensive problem because a consumer has been pushed all the way through a marketer's funnel only to churn at the last minute. What we've actually seen marketers do is time when those email messages or social messages or text messages get sent based on the likelihood that one of their shoppers is back online. So whether that's a 12 or 24 or 48 hour window, it's a perfect example of taking an outside piece of AI and supplementing it with our natural language processing to optimize the creative. So here you see a retailer that was able to generate, instant return on investment. And I'd say it was because of two things. One, a very clear and cohesive testing strategy about trying email messages for cart abandonment, but also combining different areas of their first-party data to provide a more holistic brand experience with their consumers.
Great. And, as you think about this, retailers have so much on their plates right now. I mean, the list is kind of endless. How do they or where in the organization is kind of like bubble to the top? And, $50 million is a big number, but how are they made aware of the potential opportunity? And then ultimately kind of who owns this relationship back with Persado?
Sure. So a couple of things. One, in the middle of last year, we brought an outside consulting firm to take a look at the economics of our relationships with our customers. We found a couple of things. For any campaign that Persado touched, the average increase in incremental revenue was roughly 41% across all industries, across all channels. And at scale, Persado was generating roughly 1% to 2% incremental revenue globally across the board for our clients. So that's a good rule of thumb that we've used to start conversations and put some context behind the $50 million of increased revenue. In terms of managing the relationship, as well as measuring performance over time, my team actually is responsible for not only building these forecast models in conjunction with our customers and our prospective customers, but we've also productized the ability to look back and see if we promised $50 million or we forecasted $50 million of incremental revenue, did we deliver 60 or did we deliver 35? Which I believe has contributed very positively towards increasing the amount of confidence that our customers have working with us.
That's really great. I mean, it's interesting as I just kind of summarize and step back. It seems like we've heard about different organizations utilizing AI and ML, sometimes in a kind of disconnected format internally, but really this can help, I think, connect so much inside of an organization. And as businesses kind of make this move to more first party data, this could also really start to drive some of these this tighter connectivity, fabric tissue in an organization. And I think what was also really interesting that I learned today was, not only are you working with retail, but as you think about, my prior world of, finance and also media, just the opportunity to have an impact and, really to have you think a lot of these companies work together. So, I will be examining all of the inbounds even more carefully to see if there was an AI component, Alex, because I think that's so interesting. And I think we have one last question we're going to squeak in, which is what revenue level from an e-commerce perspective is required to run or engage Personato?
Sure. I would actually say there isn't a minimum. And then the second thing I would say is Personato actually provides a contractual guarantee that at a minimum, we will return to a retail customer enough gross revenue so that the incremental profit that we generate is equal to the contract value, or you get your money back. I believe that that's pretty unique in the industry. So for example, if throughout a potential sales cycle with a new customer, we believe that a contract value is worth $200,000 and it will take $1 million of revenue for that retailer to see at least $200,000 of incremental profit, we will financially guarantee the $1 million of incremental revenue. And that is something that my team works on in conjunction, obviously with internal teams at Personato, but with the finance, procurement, and legal teams at our customers.
That's huge. All right, we're gonna end on that because that is like the one thing that everybody needs to remember. Alex, thank you. Never enough time. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye.